Welcome, everyone. The webinar will begin at the top of the hour and will be recorded. We'd love for you to connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us and to tweet anything from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, the campaign wants to connect with you. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. The webinar will begin shortly, and it will be recorded and shared with you after.
It's the top of the hour now, so I'll go ahead and say hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar, Centering Parent-Teacher Partnerships on Student Learning. My name is Sarah Torian, and I'm a consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, and I'm helping to manage this online learning series, GLR Learning Tuesdays. Before we get started with today's conversation, I just wanted to go over a few very quick housekeeping details. First of all, I'd encourage you to introduce yourself. Use the chat box function on the side of your screen and let us know your name and organization. And be sure to check all panelists and attendees in the to option so that everyone can see who is in the room with us today. I'd also like to share that all webinar attendees will be participating in listen-only mode during today's presentations, and that's to avoid any background noises or distractions during the presentations. But we do strongly encourage your active engagement throughout the conversations and would invite you to share any questions that might come to you in the Q&A box on the Zoom screen, and we'll respond to those after the presentations are over. Now, this is a little bit different for those of you who might have been joining in these conversations for a while. Previously, we've been asking attendees to share questions in the chat box. Now we have a Q&A option, and it makes it much easier for the moderator and panelists to see your questions as they're coming in and respond to them promptly. So look for that Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We do also encourage you to share any thoughts or reflections that might come to you as a result of these presentations using the chat box as well, though. As you might have heard if you joined a little bit early, today's webinar is being recorded, and we will be sharing a link to that recording to all who registered for today's conversation. Keep an eye out early next week for an email that goes to all registrants, including a link to the recording, a link to the slide deck, as well as a link to all resources that were shared during today's conversation. I also wanted to give you a heads up that we will be posting a very brief survey poll after the presentations are over during the Q&A portion of the webinar, and would encourage you to take just a couple of very quick moments to share your thoughts and feedback in that poll. It helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement to make sure that these conversations are meeting your needs and are about topics that are of interest and relevance to your work. Now I'd like to share just a little bit of background about GLR Learning Tuesdays. As you can see on the screen in front of you, we've got a number of great sessions planned for the coming weeks, always on Tuesdays, always starting at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're hoping that this predictable and reliable schedule will make it easier for you and for others to make plans to join in for these conversations on a regular basis. We have now hosted more than 20 webinars since the launch of GLR Learning Tuesdays last September, so I would also encourage you to check out CLIP. That's the campaign's Community Learning for Impact and Improvement platform, where you can find the growing archive of resources from these online learning conversations exploring the best science, ideas, and programs for our work to ensure early school success for more children from low-income families. And then I also hope you'll continue to save this date and time and make plans to join in for more of these great online learning events. And now, as wonderful as online learning is, it's also wonderful to see each other in person. So I'm also excited to invite you to join us at GLR Week 2020 in Washington, D.C. this coming July, where we will have even more opportunities to learn with and from each other about how best to support children's early language and literacy development. If you register before April 15th, you can access some great early bird discounts as well. But now for today's conversation. This is the fifth in our Productive Parent-Teacher Partnership series. With support from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, this special series is designed to equip GLR community leads and local funders with new insights, fresh tools, and evidence of impact to help them assure early school success by strengthening family engagement. Today, we're going to hear how two social entrepreneurs are crafting solutions to better support student success through strong parent-teacher partnerships. And to begin that conversation, I am very honored to introduce our two panelists and then later our moderator. First, our panelists. Dr. Maria Paredes is a Senior Engagement Manager at West Ed, where she focuses on family engagement. Paredes works collaboratively with schools, districts, and state agencies to help build readiness and capacity for implementation of the Academic Parent-Teacher Teams, that's APTT, model of family engagement. For 25 years, Paredes has been a teacher, district administrator, researcher, and a parent educator working to transform the ways families participate as partners in education. The APTT model she developed in 2009, which you'll hear a lot more about in just a moment, has provided a system and opened doors for parents and teachers to work as a team to impact student learning and achievement. Paredes has dedicated her life work to increasing equity in education and improving opportunities for students and families in underserved communities. I'm also excited to welcome Meghan Wells, who is Senior Director of Programs and Research at PowerMyLearning, a national education nonprofit where she has served in various roles since 2012. Meghan was deeply involved in the launch and early development of Family Playlists, another great resource that you're going to hear about in just a moment, an innovative new tool to connect teachers, families, and students around learning content. In her current role, she manages program development and evaluation for the organization and oversees national partnership implementation. She has more than 12 years of experience in the education nonprofit sector, including work with Data Quality Campaign and Children's Literacy Initiative. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today. Roberto Rodriguez is the president and CEO of Teach Plus, where he spearheads the movement to grow and strengthen teacher leadership by empowering excellent, experienced, and diverse teachers to advance change in education that will yield success for students. Roberto is nationally recognized for his expertise in education policy and governance and for his leadership in building multi-sector partnerships with schools, families, and communities to improve educational opportunities for all children. Prior to joining Teach Plus, Roberto served in senior roles in the U.S. Senate and in the White House. From 2009 to 2017, he developed and led President Obama's education initiatives to build systemic change and improve opportunity and outcomes across the educational continuum, resulting in an increase of tens of thousands of additional children enrolled in early education, an expansion of the Pell Grant to boost participation in higher education, and passage by Congress of the bipartisan Every Student Succeeds, or ESSA, Act of 2015. Prior to his service in the White House, Roberto led legislative and education policy development efforts for the late U.S. Senator Ted Kennedy, former chairman of the U.S. Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. Roberto began his professional career at the nation's largest Latino civil rights and advocacy organization, Unidos US, where he worked to elevate voice and further educational opportunity across the Latino community. So welcome all, Roberto, Maria, and Meghan. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to Roberto so that we can learn a little bit more about Teach Plus as well as APTT and family playlists.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you and an honor to be moderating today's exciting conversation about parent-teacher connections in the service of our students. I want to welcome all of the GLR partners that are joining us today, all the guests that are joining today's webinar. I'd like to kick us off by sharing a little bit about our work here at Teach Plus and framing the conversation that we're going to have today around parent-teacher partnerships to support student learning. You know, here at Teach Plus, we're a national organization. The mission is to empower and elevate the leadership and the voice of our excellent, experienced teachers toward change. We are committed to the premise that when teachers lead, students thrive. And we work with our teacher leaders to engage policymakers and decision makers in our education system so that they can construct policies and systems that are more responsive to the needs of teachers, to the needs of learners and their families. And when we work with our teacher leaders in schools across the country, from Chicago to Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and throughout Texas, our teacher leaders are on the front lines of formulating solutions and leading their peers in their schools toward instructional change that will be durable and that will make a difference for the lives of their students. All of this is in the service of a mandate and a calling to advance opportunity and to advance equity across our education system for our learners. You know, our teacher leaders succeed in the work that they do and in the work that we support at Teach Plus, in large part because we help to support their proficiency and their development of what we like to think of as a second language. It's a language to work with policymakers and advocacy and policy. It's a language to work in their schools with other adults, with their principals, around instructional changes that need to be made for the betterment and well-being of their students. And our topic today about facilitating stronger connections between our parents and our teachers is in large part about developing new languages and new opportunities to connect perspectives, to connect views in the service of our students. Effective partnerships here are key, and we're going to learn a little bit more about two wonderful models that help to advance the depth of partnership, the depth of language development and connection between our teachers and our parents. Often in the lives of our students, our teachers and our parents might hold different views on the needs of their children. They might approach learning and development in different ways. They may not always share the same information or have access to the same information around how their students develop. So I think the broad framing and takeaway here is that our students need our parents and they need our teachers to put them at the center of their learning, at the center of their development and success. And they need our teachers and our parents to be true partners in that endeavor to help our students succeed. So it's my honor to be here and to introduce our two panelists to have a conversation with you today and to take your questions and facilitate a bit of a discussion around how we foster more of these parent-teacher partnerships that engage strategies, some new and exciting strategies for successful student learning. We're going to begin our conversation today with Maria Paredes of West Ed. And I'm so pleased to have Maria with us. She is a leader in this work. And so let me turn to you, Maria, and ask about your model, academic parent-teacher teams. This model grew out of your classroom experience and your leadership as the Director of Family and Community Engagement in your district. Tell us a little bit about that foundational experience for you. What were some of the challenges and opportunities that you faced around engaging our families in that role?
Yeah, good afternoon. It's great to be here. Thank you, Roberto, for the question. Academic parent-teacher teams, it really came from an abundance of experiences throughout my professional life. I started out as a middle school teacher for many years, and part of that experience was, of course, interacting with parents on a regular basis, having parent conferences with the parents of the students in my class, and communicating regularly. What I realized during that experience as a teacher is that I personally really enjoyed developing relationships with parents, but I also noticed that not all teachers necessarily felt the same way or spent as much time preparing for parent conferences, and their experience with parents was very different than mine. So that was one aspect. So what I took from that experience is that parents were having very different experiences depending on the teacher that was teaching their child. And so there was an inconsistency in the quality of information that was being shared with parents during parent-teacher conferences across the nation's schools. After my experience with teaching, I became an administrator for a school district in Phoenix, Arizona, and later became the director of family and community engagement. In that experience, I was the director of summer school for all of the children in our school district. And with that responsibility came registering all of the students for summer school. And the parents would come into our office around March, April, the spring for summer school. And what we experienced is that parents would come in extremely confused and concerned, especially concerned about their children just being told by their teacher that their children were below grade level or even in danger of being retained. And they shared that they felt like this was coming from nowhere, right? That they were not necessarily informed earlier. In my conversations with teachers, they would tell me that they had been giving this information to parents throughout the year, that it shouldn't have been a surprise to parents that their children needed more work and needed to attend summer school, and that possibly they could be retained. So this gave me a very clear picture that there was a big gap in communication between our parents and our teachers. And even when our teachers felt that they had shared the information, our parents were not necessarily understanding this information, and they were not necessarily aware of the dire need that their children had for more learning and for support, additional support throughout the school year. So here are the experiences start mounting on my part for the need for a more robust approach to how parents and teachers come together. Another experience that was important for us in my Department of Family and Community Engagement, we really wanted to understand what were all of the schools in our district doing to engage parents or to involve parents. And so we conducted this inventory of all the schools and every activity they were doing that they invited parents to participate in the school. And when we concluded that research, we found that most schools in the district had 20 or 30, and so in some instances more than 30 activities for parents, but that none of them, not one of them, was actually focused on developing the capacity of parents to support their children's learning at home. That it was really more of a broad, there were broad activities and not necessarily focused on learning. So with the exception of parent conferences, nothing else was really grade level specific and certainly not child specific. So these experiences together really led me to realize that we were missing an incredible opportunity to really reimagine how our schools could engage families in activities that were much more intentional and much more focused on how the children are doing, how they are performing, and what parents and teachers can do together to actually support that child. At the same time, this was over 2 decades ago, and that's when a lot of parent engagement research was coming out. This was the time of a new wave of evidence and many other really important research that informed all of us who were doing this work at that time to really get past what we were doing that was that really could be improved. So for me, it was really important I felt that I was in the perfect place to try and develop something different. So can you move to the next slide, please? So this was really the beginning of academic parent-teacher teams. Academic parent-teacher teams is a framework that I developed and tested over the course of 2 years in our district to try and redesign, create a brand new approach so that parents and teachers could come together more regularly, in this case is quarterly, and actually learn about data, communicate, develop relationships, learn about areas that they can practice at home to make sure that they reinforce what's happening in the classroom, and for parents to feel that they have a safe place with other parents to discuss specific classroom learning and standards and skills. So this was something that I felt was missing from the system, and that it could easily be made a part of how schools work, and also decrease the amounts of other activities that might not necessarily be benefiting parents or schools for that matter, create efficiencies in the system, and actually start fresh with a whole new attitude and mindset about how important these relationships are between parents and teachers and how far our students can go if they are working together.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Maria. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing those experiences. And it sounds to me, that a lot of these gaps in communication, in knowledge and information gave rise to, and the lack of tools that you mentioned, really gave rise to APTT. Can you talk to us a little bit about how the model changes the way our parents and teachers engage with one another to support their learning and development of the children, and how does the model bridge some of those gaps?
Yeah. So in the next slide, I will show you the way this framework is set up. So academic parent-teacher teams happens 4 times a year and is divided into team meetings and 1 individual session. So a team meeting is a meeting where a classroom teacher invites all of the parents in his or her class to come together. It's an adult meeting. It's an adult learning meeting. And it lasts 75 minutes. And we start as early in the fall as we have data to share with parents. So it's at the very beginning of the school year. And then we follow that with an individual session. So the parent the teacher and the child, or the parents, the family, the child and the teacher. So this is a time to more individually address each individual child's needs and really have in-depth personal conversations about each child. And then we follow it with another team meeting in the beginning of winter, around January, and then another team meeting around March or April. So we're trying to have parents working with teachers from the beginning of the year and on a consistent basis over the course of the school year, to make sure that there's always a thread of information and that parents have everything that they need. In addition, the way a team meeting works is every time parents come together as a team. This picture that you see is an actual APTT meeting that I was just at about 2 weeks ago. So every team meeting is set up in the same manner. The framework, this is the framework for the essential elements that take place during the meeting. It all starts with a team building activity. We want parents to feel comfortable, to feel welcome, to feel like that is their safe place, a place where they can get to know other parents and form a network, a community of learners. And then that's followed by a mini lesson from the teacher on foundational grade level skills. The teacher has, during our time planning for this, the principal and the teacher and the instructional coaches in the schools help each grade level team come up with the priority academic learning for that time of the year based on test scores. And so we choose those skills. We talk to parents about why this skill is so important at that grade level and how it's connected to future learning and how it's a building block. We then share data with parents about how their own child is doing in that particular skill or in that particular standard. And that way parents can see if their child is performing on grade level, if they are ahead, if they're a little bit low, and also they get to see what the expectation is at the end of the year with performance in that particular skill. So parents really get a clear and transparent view of their child in relationship to other children in the class and in relationship to benchmarks. And all of this is done privately in the sense that parents receive a private number to identify their own child on the data graph, and the rest of the parents don't know. It's private to each individual family, but it gives families a view of how the class is performing, and again, what the benchmarks are at each pace or at each quarter of the school year.
Wonderful.
Teachers model activities that parents can do at home to practice that skill. Families get the materials, the resources, practice with other parents, and then at the end of the meeting, the teacher facilitates how to set a SMART goal based on data, based on benchmarks, and based on their own ability to support their child. So this is what an APTT meeting is, and it really gives teachers an ability to give all parents a message that is consistent, that it's public, that it's that can be discussed, and parents get a chance during these meetings to really develop relationships, ask questions, and share their own ideas and experiences. Parents in each classroom vary in the amount of best practices and experiences and knowledge that they bring to the table, but that's what makes it wonderful and and helpful to all.
It's wonderful, Maria. Thank you. I'm looking at this wonderful slide and these 6 essential elements and thinking about how it really is an opportunity for parents to craft a shared experience with teachers and with educators around the success of their students, bridge some of these gaps that you identified. Let's talk a little bit about the capacity that it takes to get this done, to implement it, right? So how do you work with schools and school districts to build that capacity for some of the mindset shifts, for some of the practice shifts that are needed, some of the shifts in perspective, as we talked about, and in language, so to speak, that are needed for parents and teachers to collaborate together under this model?
That's really, really important. And when we work together with the school, the first thing that we do really is work, even before we become partners, WestEd and a school or a school district, we first talk extensively. I make presentations to the leadership teams. I make presentations to teachers. We talk about roles and responsibilities. We really try to understand what they are about to agree to be a part of. And this period of time it's critical because we want to make sure that there is commitment on the part of the school leader, on the part of the leadership team of that school, and also on the part of the teachers. And that parents also are informed and agree that this is a positive new step for the school. So at WestEd, we have a large APTT team of coaches and trainers. All of our coaches and trainers have experience as being a school principal, an instructional coach, a teacher. So every single person has been in the shoes of those that we are going to train and coach. And that's really important in order to have that sort of level of credibility with the school personnel and the district personnel. So we start with initial professional development, where every single person in the school, including the front office secretaries if possible, and the teachers that teach specials, we all come together and do professional development, including looking at the research and understanding the model. And we model for them what a team meeting is like. We help them facilitate it, and we learn a lot about how to start really developing close relationships with families, how important that is for this to be successful. And then what we call a continuous improvement of support is that for each of the team meetings, for team meeting 1 in the early fall, and then team meeting number 2 around January or so, and then team meeting 3 around March or April, we start about a month before and actually sit down with every grade level team of teachers, the instructional coach and the principal, and we plan for our meeting. We look at the school data, we make decisions and identify priorities, and all of this with an eye on it all being parent friendly. It's really important that we realize that we're not going to ask parents to teach. We're going to ask parents to be partners in practice and in making all of this information practical in the home life and in the relationship with their child. So we plan with teachers with each grade level separately. We touch base with the leadership team of the school. We plan all of the logistics for the meeting. And then when it comes time to the meeting, we come to the schools, we become part of the meetings, we participate with the principal and everybody else from the district and the school. We participate in the meetings so that we can all spread around as far as we can and collect observations and know how the teachers are doing, how they feel, and then afterwards we debrief together. And so we have a protocol for this. So we all bring our ideas together for what we saw, what we think went fantastic, and then what we can do better, so that WestEd coaches can then come back again the next round of team meetings and start this process all over again with planning and support and observations and debrief session and setting goals. So we basically spend a lot of time with the schools throughout the school year, because this is not just about APTT. This is about the culture of the school. It's about aligning family engagement with school improvement goals, district improvement goals, and capacity development, not only for the teachers, but also for the families.
That's wonderful. Thank you. The depth of capacity and implementation here, from inception all the way through the coaching and ongoing support, seems like such a critical piece of the success in the model. You've worked with school districts and state leaders around the model, Maria, for many years, around incubating this model and working through WestEd to connect to more schools and yield more results and build stronger relationships and partnerships between our parents and teachers. What are the results that you're seeing? Talk to us a little bit about some of the success, some of the impact out there, and some of the learnings as you scale the model further.
Yeah, so let me, I left my school district in 2011 to join WestEd, and at that time, we were just in one corner of Arizona, right? The Valley, Phoenix area. And from 2011 to 2020, we really saw a need and a desire for school districts all across the United States to learn more, and in many instances adopt and implement and do these models. So in the last 9 years, we are in approximately 1,800 to 2,000 schools across the United States and in 26 states. Some states have a handful of schools. Other states have dozens of schools and school districts. So it varies how many schools or districts are implementing this. We have counties in many states in the United States where the entire county is an APTT county. So that's what they practice instead of the traditional parent conferences. So we have been blessed, and we are just excited about our work and the work that we do with schools and school districts. So this is what it looks like now, and it looks like we might grow into a couple of other states in next school year. The next slide tells a little bit about what we have learned. You asked me this question, and this is really important, because anytime you despite the fact that we tried this out, we researched this out in my own personal district, in my own district, the reality is that once you go out into the wider nation, that you learn so many lessons. I have been part of my district for many years, so I had the trust of principals, of teachers, of the superintendent, and so I was in my own little bubble, if you will, right? And so we learned a lot there, but to take it out and to really try it in different communities, communities that are, from New York to New Mexico to Washington State and Alaska, Florida. Everybody has a whole different approach to things, and the culture is different. The rules are different everywhere. So what we learned from the last few years is that the first thing that we need to secure is that before working together with the school or a district, that we have to do the work prior to starting the initiative to really create commitment and willingness from the administrators at the district level, at the school, and that teachers are actually willing to give this a try, to embrace this approach. We also learned that if the school or the district has to really kickstart, I would say, a concept of teachers really reaching out to families, feeling comfortable with developing relationships, because if they traditionally have not really reached out to families and developed relationships, we're asking them to do this, and it's a big shift. So we really have to do a lot of training and coaching around this area, because not all teachers are extroverts and not all teachers feel confident and comfortable doing this, because it has never been an ask for them in the past. So this is big change, right? We also learned that it is critical that everyone who's going to be involved participate in professional development and coaching. This is not a overnight type of program, right, or initiative. This is development that takes time. It doesn't even just take a year. It takes several years to get good at this, to really own it, and to grow it and to scale it throughout the grade levels and even throughout middle school and high school, right? The next thing is, it really has to feel like it's part of how the school works. It has to, like, planning meetings with teachers really have to be part of their PLC, of how they plan together by grade levels. It has to feel that this is an extension of learning, that learning at home is an extension of what happens in the classroom, and that it's a benefit not just to the children and the families, but it's a big benefit to the teachers, because parents are going to be working hand in hand with them. And so, and it also has to be a part clearly articulated in the school's improvement plans and Title I plans and everything, that this is what they are doing to engage families, and that it is deep, that it is intentional, and that it really is focused on learning and academic success for the students. And lastly, we learned that data collection is critical, not just the first year or the second year, but all the time. The schools have to really know that they are making a difference, that parents are doing the work, that teachers are learning alongside the parents, and that it's impacting student achievement. So all along, as you collect data, you get better, you get feedback from parents, you get feedback from students, from teachers, from everybody involved, and you make improvements, and you make it yours, right? As a school, it becomes part of the school DNA, I like to say.
It's wonderful, Maria. I just want to offer my congratulations for the tremendous work of building and developing APTT, and the work of scaling and connecting to our districts and our education leaders in making that change happen for kids. I think some of the points that you raised around building a shared vision, around building a shared roadmap for change, around meeting our parents where they are, and doing that with a real asset-based approach to building these partnerships, to breaking down those barriers to communication and connection. Those are important features, it sounds like, for APTT, but also really important lessons for the broader field of family engagement to learn from, to think about how do we prioritize relationships, prioritize capacity, take the time to build the will of our teachers and our educators and our education leaders to prioritize family engagement as a tool, as a strategy for improving opportunity and outcomes for our learners. Thank you so much for sharing some of those insights. There are a lot of questions queuing up for you about APTT and the work. We're going to get to those a little bit later in our time together. Before we do that, I want to turn now to Meghan Wells at PowerMyLearning. And thank you, Meghan, for being with us today. I'm excited to hear more about the context as we dive into Power Our Learning and your most recent innovation, the family playlist, which is also about meeting parents where they are and getting them engaged in their children's learning and success. Tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing now for over 2 decades in building PowerMyLearning and how that work has evolved over time.
Sure. Thanks, Roberto, and thanks everyone for having us here today. So PowerMyLearning is a national nonprofit organization that has been doing work in the field for over 20 years now in supporting schools with strengthening their family engagement and also teachers with their instructional practice. And I think, like what Maria was describing, through our work with schools, we were seeing a lot of gaps. So typically what we would see in schools is that the 2 groups of folks who were most important to student learning, their teachers and their families, were often operating kind of in a straight line. So if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see the visual there. So, you know, teachers were very focused on what was happening in the classroom, on their instruction and improving their instructional practices, but often sort of saw families and family engagement as a little bit of an afterthought, a nice to have. Oh, I should let the families know about this. Meanwhile, of course, families who are absolutely central to students' learning and growth are supporting student learning, but in a way that's disconnected and happening kind of off stage. It's often not visible to teachers through conversations at home. And these things were sort of in silos. So students were having different experiences with their learning at home and at school. And to the extent that schools were providing family engagement initiatives or strategies, it was a lot like what Maria described, which is this kind of one-off events or initiatives that often were completely disconnected from student learning. A lot of them happening at the building level. You know, Dr. Karen Mapp talks about random acts of family engagement, and that's a lot of what we were seeing, you know, donuts for dads or a movie night or a dance. And these are great opportunities to build community and relationships and trust with families for sure. But when it stops there and it's not connecting then to, and so what about student learning and how are we partnering together to support kids and put them at the center of it? That was really a gap that we were seeing. And so our approach is to try to bring these groups together and create a system of support for students that are aligned and coordinated. We talk about them all kind of rowing in the same direction or being on the same team when it comes to student learning. And so our goals ultimately are to see increased student mastery of learning content and improve social and emotional learning skills for students. And we believe that we can best achieve this when we're strengthening those arrows that you see in our triangle. So between teachers and students, yes, in the classroom, but also between students and families in a way that's coordinating with what's happening in school. And to do that effectively, you really need to bring teachers and families directly together and put them on a team together to really connect all 3 sides of our learning triangle. So that's really been our North Star at PowerMyLearning. As we develop out our programs and products and approaches, we're trying to really strengthen what we call the learning relationships around the triangle.
Thank you, Meghan. And it's wonderful to see students at the top there, at the center of this work, right? And you mentioned the word team, right? How do we engage parents and families as team members for their students in curriculum and in learning? That's, I know, at the center of this idea of the family playlist, your most recent innovation. Talk to us a little bit about how that happens for students as they teach their parents at home and how family playlists came about.
Sure. So family playlists are, you know, our most recent, I guess, innovation in terms of supporting the triangle. And so really what it's trying to do is give teachers a tool or a strategy to operationalize that triangle. So you can tell teachers, you know, you need to team up with families to support student learning and for the most part, everyone will agree that's a good idea, but it's a lot harder to put into practice when you're a teacher busy doing a million things. So we wanted to really leverage our expertise, which in part is, in technology. We have a lot of online learning resources and a learning platform that supports teachers and families. We wanted to leverage that to provide a concrete tool or approach that would really do what we think is so important and connect all those dots together around student learning. And so Family Playlist is essentially a tool that helps teachers do that effectively. In order to develop Family Playlists, we based it in a lot of research from the field. So we were looking at what are the current best practices and strategies that are shown to impact student outcomes in the family engagement space. And we were drawn in particular to a strategy out of the Johns Hopkins University called TIPS, which some may be familiar with. It's the Teachers Involving Parents in Schoolwork Interactive Homework Approach that was mentioned in New Wave of Evidence, as Maria cited in other places, as having a really strong research base. We know that family engagement is correlated to improved student outcomes, but it's hard to find specific strategies and interventions that yield those academic outcomes directly. And we were excited by the research base from TIPS that showed that when you have these home-based learning prompts and assignments that are directly connected to the classroom learning and giving families those specific ways to support, letting students take the lead to show and share what they're learning at home. And then critically in the TIPS model, they have a feedback loop where families are giving feedback back to the teacher about how those home learning assignments went. That all leads to not only enhanced family engagement, improved family attitudes, but increased student achievement. So we were really attracted to that core concept of the interactive homework and wanted to bring a technology lens to it to kind of overcome some of the traditional barriers that we were seeing in schools to effective family engagement. So one of those, perhaps the most obvious, is just the being physically present in the school can sometimes be a challenge for families for a variety of reasons. We know there are busy schedules and a variety of reasons families might not feel comfortable or welcome in the school building. And so we are trying to give teachers a way to engage with families that feels really safe, that engages them anytime, anywhere, that leverages the technology that they're already using. And so we wanted to create something that was mobile friendly. And Family Playlists is essentially a digital version of a home interactive assignment that leverages families' phones. And so that was one way to sort of overcome a barrier that we were seeing. Another is we hear a lot when it comes to engaging families in student learning specifically, that families can be intimidated by the content, especially as you get up in the grade levels, of not remembering the content, of maybe having had it taught to them a different way when they were in school, and that teachers maybe not feeling confident that families have the skills or content knowledge to support effectively at home. And what Family Playlist does is really have students take the lead. And not only does that center the students and make them part of that three-way team of the triangle, but it also eliminates that barrier where families have to feel like they need to be teachers themselves and really have a deep understanding of content to be supportive at home. It's really having the students show, share, lead through interactive home-based activities related to the content in school. And by putting students in that role, families become the partner, the coach, asking good questions. And it's almost like the less they know about the content, the more students get to teach and share. And so it's actually sort of accomplishing that goal as well. And then the last piece was language barriers. So we see this a lot. A lot of our communities have a variety of home languages spoken, and that can be a real challenge to overcome when the teachers don't speak that language. And so we wanted to, again, use technology to overcome that by providing translation. And we have, it says 12 languages. We actually have Family Playlists available in over 100 languages by leveraging kind of Google automated translation. But then we also have support resources that are teacher and family facing in 12 languages as well that are professionally translated. So we really want to make sure language access is a central piece of the model. So in terms of how it works, because I think it's easier to see, we'll go quickly sort of through this so people can have a sense. So essentially teachers can search through a content library of playlists, which are, again, those digital assignments that are aligned and organized by standard and topic and grade level. So we have a big bank of content in K through 8 in math, ELA, and science. And teachers find a family playlist that they like, that aligns to what they're teaching, and they assign it to their students. So the families then get a text message in their home language that gives them the link to the assignment. It's not an app that they have to download. We actually were really intentional about trying to eliminate barriers of having families have to like proactively download something. It doesn't have login screens. They just click the link, which is personalized, and it takes them to the assignment. So next they see this interface that you're looking at now that opens on their browser, and it has these different pieces. There's a note to the family partner at the top. Again, this will appear in their home language. There's then sort of 5 main sections. The first 3 are student learn, practice, and check. And the final 2 are family exploration and family feedback. So for the first 3, in the next piece there, the student is engaging with a video that recaps the skill. They're doing a simple practice activity that can be an interactive game or some way to just practice and reinforce the skill. And then they're taking a couple of quick multiple choice assessment questions in the check to gauge their understanding, and those give them automated feedback. And so this is really student facing, but the families can access obviously these resources as well if they're interested in how it's being taught. They then move on to the family exploration, which is where the student takes the lead as the teacher. So this is the interactive prompt. The prompt is digital, but the activities, we feel like it's important that those be offline and involve a real human interaction with the families and the students, something that's real world. This example has, I believe the prompt here was to have kids create a coordinate plane that reflects their neighborhood. So their home is at the origin and they're plotting places of importance to their family and describing quadrants and coordinate pairs using that activity to their family partner. And then you can, the families can upload images of themselves working together, of the, artifacts of what they were doing at home with the learning. So they can upload selfies, they can upload their work product. And then in the final stage, family feedback, this is directed to the family partner. So the family partner gets to answer 3 yes/no questions about, did you enjoy the activity? Did your child seem to understand the content? So they don't, again, have to be experts, but did your child seem confident when they were doing the activity with you? And then did it help you understand what your child's learning in school? And then they have an option to enter an open-ended, you can see their comment or question if they want to the teacher. And then the final piece, which I think is most powerful from the school side, is the data and reports that are able to be seen through this intervention. So the teacher then has a dashboard where they can see at the top like a roll-up of class level engagement, family responses to the 3 questions. They can see all of the data from the playlist, both the academic piece from the students taking the assessment, but also the family exploration responses, the photos, and the family comments. And then they can write back to the family. So there's another 2-way element of the communication there, and everything is automatically translated. So when the family comments come in a different language, it translates, and you can see the original, and then when it goes out, it translates from English, if that's the language the teacher is using, back to the language of the family partner. And so it, and that goes back as a text message as well. So it's really, again, you kind of seen the triangle there hovering above this flow. You can see how it really kind of goes around all 3 arrows and tries to connect the 3 main constituent groups around the learning activities and learning content.
Wonderful. And it really, Meghan, looks like it puts students in the role of teacher at home, which is a really, I think, powerful and interesting way to disrupt what we normally think of as the power dynamics for students, really value them and their voice. What do you see in terms of results as you put some of this data here in the hands of teachers? How did they use this data, and what have you learned as you've carried forth the family playlists model? Any surprises or lessons that you'd like to share there?
Sure. So in terms of results, this is still a fairly young intervention, but we've had some really exciting early evidence that this can impact student achievement and family engagement. So we had our initial group of schools was in the South Bronx. We had 3 all middle schools, and we looked at a kind of quasi-experimental study to look at student state test scores in math. And what we found was that there was a statistically significant and pretty large effect of the students who participated in the family playlist versus prior year students of the same teachers who did not, in terms of their learning. And it actually is equivalent to 4 months of additional learning when they're doing these out of school activities and engaging in this way. The family engagement itself, we've also been, of course, collecting data on. So we saw in our initial pilot that 91% of families were participating in these assignments. And of those families, 84% were choosing. There's that, you sort of saw it briefly, there's an optional box that asks, do you have any other comments or questions for the teacher? And that's, optional, it's not required, but we saw 84% of families choosing to type and leverage that box to have a communication back and forth with the teacher, which is another exciting indication for us of strong engagement. And then another thing we look at is, equity. and language access being really important to us, we wanted to understand in those schools in particular, early on, it was primarily Spanish was the other non-English language. And so we wanted to look at outcomes for both English and Spanish speaking families and see if, we were having any gaps there. And we were excited that it was comparable participation rates. We had 91% English speaking families, 89% Spanish speaking families, which was another thing we want to make sure that we're always, inviting all families in at the same level. So those are some of our early results. And, again, this is about, I think this is our 3 years old now. So we're continuing to build evidence over time as we grow and scale to other contexts beyond those initial schools. But we're really excited by the potential of the tool. And then in terms of learnings, there have been several. I think this is a slide kind of throws out some quotes to exemplify some of the different themes. I think from principals, one thing we've definitely heard is the measurement piece. So those reports can be a really powerful way to measure family engagement. It's really hard. I mean, a lot of schools are just looking, they know it's important. The research has borne this out, that it's really important, but what does that mean and what does it look like and how do you measure it? And I think a lot of times it's still attendance as the main metric for family engagement at school-based events. And like I said earlier, that can be a barrier or not capture all families and not really capture the learning that's happening outside of school. And so this is another way to bring measurement into the equation, and what you can measure, you can manage. And so principals really appreciate that piece. Teachers have said to us that this can be a really, homework can be a challenge for a lot of schools and teachers. It varies in terms of how meaningful it is, I think, and how purposeful and to what extent it's giving families insight into the learning that's happening in school. And so I think this is a way to take, what can sometimes be an effective homework and transform it into something that's really powerful, that gives students like a real next level learning experience where they're again having to like teach and share and have like a deep understanding of the content, and at the same time bringing families in, which is so critical. For students, I think one piece that we have emphasized more and more over time is the student-led aspect that you mentioned, Roberto. So I think for TIPS, which was the model we originally had in mind when we were designing family playlists, it's certainly there. The activities are student-led in many cases, but it's not, the research doesn't cite it as the principal mechanism of the impact. And for us, what we heard organically from our early implementations is like the piece about students leading the activities is actually critical. Like this is powerful. And so we started talking to researchers in the space of learning by teaching, and sometimes called the protege effect of basically when you have to teach it, you learn it better. It's kind of a common sense concept, but we've been emphasizing that more and more and trying to make sure all the prompts are really putting even the youngest students in the driver's seat. Like the parent should not be the one explaining and leading. It should be students sharing, showing. And then the last piece I think is just to have a joyful experience. Like we've heard a lot of just really happy comments from parents about, we had fun, we bonded, this was so silly, having silly photos of like home science experiments. And I think a lot of times family engagement, families are kind of brought in to be the compliance monitor. Like, did you get your homework done? Can you talk to your child about their behavior? And this is a way to kind of engage families in learning in a way that's joyful and fun, and kids get to show off what they know. And for us, that's a really important piece as well.
That's great. And what, as we think a little bit about the efficacy of the model, its opportunity to drive better outcomes for students. What have you learned, Meghan, about the support that teachers need to be able to incorporate some of this work that you're leading into their curriculum, into their teaching and learning in their classroom?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I echo Maria when, it's important, the readiness is really important for sure. I think for us, like anything, a product dropped into a vacuum is not on its own going to be successful. And so I think there's some context in schools and districts that we can kind of discern through conversations with them where, the mindsets are there, the beliefs are there, family engagement is centered, and this is just a way to catalyze it. It's like, this is the tool we've been looking for, and in that case, sometimes it is, it's product training and support around how to use the tool. In other cases, it's really not. And so we go deeper and we have a lot of professional development for teachers, not just around how to use this tool, but around, why, like, let's back up for a second, like why family engagement? How do you build trusting relationships with families? And then like building on the tool to make it even more impactful. So we'd have like follow-up sessions on data-driven instruction. So how do you use data from the reports of family playlists to personalize your follow-up with students, both academically and in terms of using it to inform and build better relationships with kids? now you know more about their families and what they're doing outside of school. We have sessions on student agency and really going deep into the students as teachers piece. So trying to make, this is a tool, but it's really a way to put into practice some of the best teacher practices that we think are impactful when it comes to family engagement and when it comes to just in general instructional practice. And so we do a lot of PD support around that and not just the tool itself. I also want to tease that we have a new framework coming out. So we have a current framework for teaching that's available on our website, PowerMyLearning.org. But we are currently, it's under construction, and we're releasing a new version in coming weeks that I'm really excited about, because it takes the domains of teacher practice, and for us that's, you know, learning environment, it's instructional planning and delivery, it's data-driven instruction, and student agency. And then instead of putting family engagement as sort of this other category of thing that if you get to it, you get to it if you're a teacher, it really creates like a whole column just for each of those domains, cutting across all those areas of teacher practice. How do you engage families in that? So when it comes to building a welcoming learning environment for kids, like how do you do that with families? How do you build trust and support and set up communication systems to like get that triangle up and running? When it comes to student agency, how do you help families support student-driven learning beyond the classroom walls? And so it really tries to think of family engagement really in an integrated way, and not the way that we so often were seeing in the past, where it's really kind of its own siloed thing. And so that's coming out soon and will be available for download for anyone who's interested. I think there's one more. So the other piece I'll just leave you with is if anyone is interested in sort of seeing the family playlist specifically, this is a way that you can do that. So if you have a mobile device, or you can do it on your computer's browser, but I think it's best experienced on a phone, you can just type this URL in, and I think we can probably put it in the chat as well. And that will let you download a family playlist. You can kind of check it out on your phone and see what it's all about.
Wonderful. Thank you, Megan. I do encourage you all to visit the URL that Megan shared here and have a chance to walk through a playlist for yourself and to really see that dynamic and that interaction between parents and their children as they're learning and exchanging information and growing together. It's a really beautiful thing. I just want to thank you both for sharing such powerful models and powerful testaments to the work around building stronger parent-teacher partnerships, around building a stronger roadmap for family engagement. At the heart of this, I really do believe, is the work to marshal the will across our education community, right? As we've had decades of waves of change in education, to marshal the will to mount the efforts we need to facilitate effective family engagement and meaningful family engagement, not as a nice to have in some places, but really as a must have for all of our students to be able to get ahead. And the models that you work, the backbone of the work that you both have walked us through around the importance to bridge the gaps between and the distance that our systems often place between our parents and our families and our students and our teachers, and to really begin to bridge the relationships, put relationships front and center there in that effort, and do so in a way that is really focused on equity, that's focused on building from the assets and the agency that our families bring, that our parents bring, and that student voice brings in this effort is just really powerful. So thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and move us over to Q&A. We've had some really great questions queuing across the course of our conversation this afternoon. And I'll do my best to try to get through some of those, as well as invite our audience to continue to add your questions to the queue here for further conversation with Dr. Paredes and with Meghan. Let me begin with one here from Becky, which is focused, actually addressed to you, Dr. Paredes, but really is about, I think both of you could comment on this. It's around addressing teacher concerns about privacy and whether it's sharing class data in the APTT context, or whether it's, you know, the data that you're collecting through PowerMyLearning. That she notes that sometimes teachers are afraid to show data because parents might gossip or talk about the range of scores in a class. How do you navigate these concerns around privacy and openness around sharing data and that culture in the schools in which you're working?
I can jump in. I think that I can't emphasize enough the importance of training and watching and learning from an expert trainer and coach as they facilitate how data is shared with parents. And part of that is the tone and the culture that you build in the classroom, where as you're explaining the purpose of APTT, for example, it's about coming together, it's about learning together, it's about succeeding together and supporting one another. And data is one of those pieces. That's the anchor for this work. And the way we explain it to parents is that basically data is a roadmap. It tells you where you are, it tells you where you're going, and it gives you ideas about how much work you have to do at home and at school in order to reach those grade level goals, right? Or benchmarks. And so I think that first of all, the data is not identified by student. It's a private number. But yes, you see the whole class reflected on the data graph. And as teachers emphasize that all students are learning at different rates, that's normal, but that we want to make sure that we are all working to make sure that students show progress and that they are working hard toward meeting the goals, and that we are all here to support each student and to meet them where they are and to help them get to the family's goals. So I think it has a lot to do with the tone and the encouragement, the positivity that is brought into the conversation. This is what makes the biggest difference. And what we have experienced in APTT is that teachers go into it, especially for the first meeting, a little nervous. And once they go through the experience and parents show appreciation for actually having the facts in front of them so they can actually do the work and do it informed by data, just like teachers are informed by data. I think it calms their nerves, and they understands that parents were thirsty for this information, that they really appreciate it, and that they are grateful to have something where they can measure. The next time they come to a meeting, they see follow-up data. So they see the pre and the post, and now they can actually see their efforts reflected in the way the students are progressing. So soon that allows teachers to really put those nerves at rest, because parents are really not there to judge. They're there to learn and to help their child. So it becomes a very positive experience for everybody involved. But that comes with training, it comes with coaching, it comes with modeling for the teachers, and for them to be able to ask all the questions and know that there is a coach there to support them.
Thank you, Maria. It's a really important course to going from data being used as a gotcha, right, which we often see in education, to how do you build the relationships and the shared stake and will to use data as a tool for change together.
Yes.
Meghan, you want to add any perspective to that around data or privacy with your tools?
Yeah, I mean, ours is a bit different, right? Because it's sort of from each student's triangle. In this particular intervention is sort of a closed circuit with the teacher. So, you know, the links that get sent out to families are personalized for that student. And so they're just interacting within that context for the interaction. But I think I agree with Maria. I mean, when it comes to teachers and supporting them, you know, we help them think about data in a, I think, a different way than they've been thinking about it in the past. Like, it is often used in the sense of assessment, and we try to help teachers look at those family engagement reports as a really powerful source of data, both on the student mastery, but really on like that family engagement side as well. This is really useful data to inform follow-up conversations with kids. You know, you sometimes get a lot of insight into like who their family, you know, who's at home helping to support their learning. Sometimes it's an older sibling or a you know, aunt or uncle or whoever. And that's really valuable data too for the teacher to better understand that child really holistically and have those follow-up conversations with them. So yeah, I don't think the model lends itself to the same, like, just because it's a different structure, but I agree with the piece about training for teachers to help to support them in how to think about data a little bit differently.
Sure. Could we have a couple questions, Maria, for you on the particulars of the APTT model? One on the question around the maximum number of parents that can be in the team meeting per teacher. And another one on whether the APTT model might work for students in middle or high school where they have multiple teachers. Could you comment on those two?
Yes. So how many parents can be in a classroom? I think we want all of the parents, and by parents we mean families, right? Sometimes the person who is actually caring for the children and helping them with learning and homework might be the grandparents or the older siblings, because parents might be at work in the evening. So it's the parents, and again, the children are doing other activities outside of the classroom. It's just the parents that are in the classroom with the teacher. So there depends on the size of the classroom. In some instances, you can have, 30 parents in one classroom at once. And it's done by classroom, not really by grade level. So that's really important. We want each classroom teacher to really develop a community in the classroom where trust and care and networking is the goal. We want parents to actually get a hold of each other outside of these meetings, to network together, to do activities together, to wanna work together. Give me 1 second, please.
I'm gonna oh, here Maria will come. She's gonna come right back.
The joys of a home office.
Sounds like my puppy.
And the part about middle school and high school, we work very closely because it looks different in different middle schools and in different high schools.
Yeah.
So that's something that we sit down with the administrators, with the teachers, and depending on the priorities that we see based on the data that we analyze, the outcomes is what determines how we are going to group these students. Is the need heaviest in math? Is the need heaviest in social emotional learning? Is the need heaviest in language arts? So depending on where the needs are, that's how we come up with teams. And every teacher should be able to facilitate a team because we practice this, we plan together, we do it together. So that's, and the high school is a whole other conversation, and it's really exciting, and I have seen it done very well. And parents are just as eager to participate in the high school as they are in preschool or in kinder or in 4th grade. So I think that's something that we don't do often enough, is really engage our families in the high school environment.
Yes, great. And so we're talking about individual teachers and teams of parents within those classrooms.
Yes.
And Maria, in terms of the demographic, that's another question that was asked. Are we talking work in has your experience really been in low income schools and communities? Does this work across SES status?
We have mostly worked with Title I schools.
Okay.
Those are the schools that districts utilize Title I funding or professional development funding, and sort of support those schools with that. But we have worked with some. I'm working with a private school right now that is not a low-income school. We have worked with several other schools, and I think the consensus is that all parents want to know either how to help their child catch up to grade level, or how to challenge their children beyond where they are right now and really expand what they are doing. So I think all parents are in a position of benefiting from having relationships with the teachers, relationships with other families, and applying the learning that's happening in the classroom, in the home, and in everyday life. I think that's a common experience across families. But in our work, it is mostly in Title I schools.
Great, thank you. Meghan, for you, a question on PowerMyLearning and the ages that those resources might be applicable to. I know you mentioned children, I forget, what did you say, as young as 4?
Well, we have K to 8. So our learning platform, PowerMyLearning Connect, where family playlists kind of live, it spans, you can search for pre-created family playlists in grades K through 8, in math and ELA, and in science for grades 3 through 8. So we have science
Wonderful
in the older grades. There's varying degrees of content coverage. So our strongest breadth of material is in grades 3 through 8 right now, but we're committed to continuing to build out the K to 2 set of content. And then any teacher can create their own family playlist. So there's like a little template where they can actually plug in their own prompts and resources, and it gets delivered in the same way, but that's a little bit more advanced, but that is an option.
So talk to me a little bit about that option, right? How difficult is it for teachers to create their own playlists? You know, what's that experience been? Have there been limiting factors there for teachers as they've tried to create their own?
Yeah, so I think the way we think about it is, in our experience, most teachers, at least when they're starting out, would like to be provided with something that's a little bit out of the box as they're getting comfortable with the new, tool. And so that's sort of why we provide the library, and we try to make it really easily searchable, again, by standard, by topic, as a keyword search, as a grade filter, all that. And so that's where we find most teachers starting for their first, few assignments as they get comfortable with the tool. Within any of those playlists, a teacher can always edit or modify. So if they don't like, if they're feeling experimental and they want to put in a different practice activity or a different video at the beginning, they can absolutely do that just by using a simple URL. So if they have like an Edpuzzler video they made of themselves teaching and they want to use that instead of our resource, they can actually just swap it out. So there's kind of a spectrum of from, little tinkering all the way to they could just start from scratch, and we give them the boxes like the learn, practice, check, and they can kind of plug in different resources. We have a content library of what we call digital learning activities that has thousands of vetted activities that teachers can search from. So we're not just asking them to build it completely from scratch. But again, I think that's a little bit, usually like teachers who have been using the tool for a while might experiment in that way. And we've seen teachers use this for, non-academic, for SEL topics about, bullying or this or that, so if they can get really fancy with it. But again, we like to provide them with a starting place.
And how does the tool find its way to your districts and schools and teachers? Is that self-directed by teachers, or do you have partnerships directly with schools and districts? How does that work?
Yeah, we primarily work through partnerships at the school or district level. So that's definitely one way. We do have, right now, we're experimenting with like a donors choose strategy as well. So if you're familiar with the website donorschoose.org, we have a project where there's a match that a funder has generously provided to help teachers fundraise for just a teacher level kind of experience where they can join a remote training and get access to the tool. So that is one path, but I would say primarily we work through school and district partnerships. That's the main way to work with us.
Wonderful. Well, we've worked through some wonderful questions here. I want to thank all of the audience for their participation here. And I want to also ask Maria and Meghan for you to share just kind of a final word here for our audience as we ask you to reflect. You both shared learnings, across the arc of the development of your model and the implementation of your resources with parents and teachers. What one learning do you want to leave this audience with respect to the field of family engagement and parent and teacher engagement? What is the one most important lesson that you would want to urge our audience to take up as they think about how to strengthen family engagement for the benefit of their learners.
Can I go first?
Let's just start us off. Go ahead.
If you like.
Go ahead.
I would say for me is that families are eager to give their children the most positive school experience they can give their children. They want their children to feel secure, to feel that they have the skills to be successful in school. So it is so important that schools and all of us educators find a way to have to improve the systems in our schools so that parents and teachers can actually be in regular communication, so that parents can ensure they are a part of the conversations about learning. They are a part of ensuring the success of their children. And there are many approaches to that, but I obviously am biased, and I think that you have to create structure for this in your schools. That's one of the ways that teachers can be successful, that administrators can be successful, and that parents can be successful, is to reimagine the way this happens in schools so that parents have a place at the table and teachers have the opportunity to have a partner in teaching and learning.
Yeah, I'd say hear to everything that Maria just said. I think for us, it's really, we have to, I think a lot of times we define the role as a teacher in a really limiting way that's limited to what happens within the classroom walls. And I think if we're to be effective with family engagement, it needs to be, teachers need to be part of that. It needs to be teachers partnering directly with families around student learning. And families, all families want to be engaged in that way. They crave to know how their child is doing and what they're learning about and to see them shine. And I think, like Maria said, we just need to build into our systems and policies, the structures, the time, the resources and tools, the training and support to help teachers do that. And I think helping teachers understand that if they're doing that, it doesn't have to feel like an extra add-on. It's actually just adding capacity to your team. Like you have the same goal of student outcomes, of improving student learning. If anything, parents care more than the teachers do. So let's get them on board and get aligned so that we can all work together to the common goal of improving learning for kids.
Meghan and Maria, thank you so much. APTT and PowerMyLearning, two powerful and wonderful approaches to advancing family engagement and parent-teacher partnership. A invitation and a call to action for all that joined us today to really help to make the space for family engagement and for parent-teacher partnerships in the schools in which you work, in the communities, and with the learners with which you work, not as a nice to have, but as a must do for the success of all of our learners. I think we all have a stake, and we all share a stake in making the space and creating the will and the imperative for that to happen for more of our learners and their families. Thank you again. I want to ask everybody to join me in thanking Meghan and Maria for their lessons today. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah to wrap us up.
Thank you so much, Roberto. That was a perfect call to action and a great way to take all the energy and inspiration that I think we all felt, I hope we all felt during this conversation today, and look for ways to put it into action as we move forward, whether in our schools or our communities, and whatever role that we can play. I'd like to extend Roberto's appreciation, reiterate that to Maria Paredes and Meghan Wells, but also I want to thank you, Roberto, for joining in and leading this wonderful conversation, and for all the work that you do at Teach Plus. I'd also like to thank everyone who joined in this conversation today, and also just want to point out, we've got a couple more moments that you could share your thoughts and feedback in the poll that should have popped up on your screen a few moments ago, but also in the chat box. I just recently shared a great report that came out recently from the Heckinger report, looking at what research says about the best ways to engage parents, taking the information and these resources that we've heard about today and putting them into action and understanding what research says about both the importance, but also how to do that, how to have meaningful and trusting relationships with parents and teachers. So thank you all again to our presenters, our moderator, and to all who joined in the conversation. I hope that if we could go to the next slide, please. I'd just like to extend an invitation again for everyone to continue joining us for these conversations on Tuesdays, and also to save the date and go ahead and register and get those early bird discounts to make plans to join us in person for GLR Week 2020 this coming July in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much. The rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Roberto.
you.
Yes.
Thank you both.
Sarah.